Great. And I see Michelle also will present so far that I know that unfortunately PICUM doesn't have a Lithuanian member, or actually this is an opportunity for Lithuanian organizations. So Michelle, just jumping from this, also your advocacy strategies around the pact and what should we do with this regulation, and also what are actual current ongoing campaigns where colleagues from Lithuania could join in and cooperate with PICUM and other colleagues.
Thank you so much, Lena. Thanks for the invitation to join this. It's really nice to hear all of those introductions at the beginning, to see you again, Lena, and to hear Catherine's input as well, and the others coming afterwards. This is just a brief mention about PICUM. So we're literally less than 5 minutes walking distance from ECRA. We thankfully are also working together with a shared staff person looking at EU funding from both of our networks. And I would say the main differentiation is that we are working specifically on undocumented migrants. So many of them who might have applied for asylum but were unsuccessful nor deported, so become undocumented. But many undocumented migrants don't go through the asylum system. They might come regularly and then become undocumented for diverse reasons. So we have around 158 member organizations, kind of around the same areas, but not yet any members in Lithuania. We have a social justice and human rights approach looking at undocumented migrants. We try to act as this bridge between local realities and the EU policy levels. And it was also really nice to hear the tour de table, so the introduction from all of your organizations, because we work on migration policy, but we also work on other policy areas which impact undocumented migrants. So for example, Greta, you'd mentioned that you're looking at gender violence. We are looking at the EU Directive on Violence Against Women and the possibility for safe reporting for undocumented women to safely report crimes of gender-based violence. And we're also looking, Indra, I don't know if you're still on, but we also have a very strong focus on children. And Monica from the LGBTIQ organization, we also are a member of the Women in Migration Network. So just as kind of, a general background about who we are. So the rest of this is on the pact. My colleague Sylvia Carta, who's leading our work on this, would have liked to join and sends her apologies, has prepared this. She has kind of been the expert, doing all the negotiations, etc. So I'll kind of draw from her her insights on this. So I would say, similar to ECRA, we as another, also as an EU network, we've been following on these files for many, many years before they were even proposed in 2020. We found that not only would these files from the pact perspective not really offer a lot of operational solutions, but they might even be harmful. And so what we've seen is we kind of, as a network, and then others as well, have developed many red lines where we find that the pact proposals now are even breaching these red lines. So for example, immigration detention of children has been globally recognized by the Committee on the Rights of the Child to always be a child rights violation and never in children's best interests. And in the Global Compact on Migration from 2018, the member states of the UN who adopted the Global Compact committed to working to end immigration detention of children. We feel that the pact will increase it. So that in and of itself is a huge red line, especially because we have 18 member states of the EU, and I should double check if Lithuania adopted it. I think it did. 18 member states who have adopted the Global Compact on Migration, so who have committed to work towards ending detention of children. That's just one example. But we have other examples like screening of undocumented migrants and other procedures where we feel that there's red lines. So we were doing advocacy to try to see what could be improved from these proposals. But at the end of this multi-year process, we found that it probably would be best to have no pact at all or no reform rather than the pact itself. And a lot of the concerns that we and others have been making were in a sense were confirmed in this political agreement, which ironically came as International Migrants Day on December 18th was ending. So we think that in this political agreement in the pact, the agreements on screening procedures and border procedures will most likely lead to detention. As I mentioned, there is no ban on child detention. There's a stricter link between asylum applications that have been unsuccessful or rejected and people immediately receiving a return decision. And also the other issue that we find really disturbing is that screening procedures would not only be applicable at the borders themselves, but also inside the territory. And I think any of us would probably understand, how does a police officer screen potential undocumented migrants inside the territory? What instructions are they given? It's most likely going to be racial profiling. So this is really in contradiction with the EU's anti-racism action plan, which also coincidentally or ironically was adopted 3 days later in September than the pact in 2020. So some of the lessons learned that we've had from the advocacy on the pact, with this traditional advocacy, also what Catherine has described, kind of meetings with policymakers, proposing amendments, issuing briefings and other communications tools, that it definitely has some impact. So we can see that in the European Parliament positions. But I think this whole exercise on the pact and other files that we've worked on, even outside the migration area, but at the EU level, have shown that it's quite difficult to influence the member states. So we can potentially have a lot of impact towards some of the parliament positions and also the commission, but the member states are always very tricky. And there has also been a lot of pressure towards the European Parliament to basically accept compromises. We found that press work and communications have been helpful to kind of show very publicly what some of the issues are on the pact, like child detention or racial profiling. And the press work that I think collectively we've had, and especially in December of last year, has kind of challenged the whole acceptance of the pact as a huge achievement from the EU side. But I think you had also mentioned this, Catherine, in your presentation, but how do we also collectively analyze how we are working as EU networks when we're forced to work together and be constructive, but at the same time are very critical of a proposal? This maybe we could have, as EU networks, thought about this, maybe how we were, I guess the challenge is how critical can you be and at what stage? I think that's maybe the question that we should all think about. In terms of next steps, so the Libe Committee in the European Parliament will look at the final text to be adopted on 14th of February. And then the plenary in the European Parliament would vote on these final texts. So there's potential actions that could be done even before these two deadlines or around them. There could still be some outreach to MEPs from Lithuania to ask them to reject the pact. There could be some communication and press work, also with any of the EU networks. And then we also indicate here about the implementation stage afterwards, that this will also be helpful to be able to work together at that point. These are also some other examples of things that organizations in Lithuania might be interested in joining. I just mentioned some of them that we're working on. So another legislative file is the facilitators package. And I noted that some of you, I think Julia from the Sinos group, was mentioning, I think also about your work at the borders. I don't know if that was, yeah, I think that was you. So this facilitators package would directly affect some of that work. Um, the proposal to revise this EU law was launched in November last year. Most likely it will not be approved as a new legislative file before the MEPs finish in June of this year and before the new commission takes place in the fall of this year. It will most likely continue on in the new mandate. But this is a huge file that impacts so many of us as civil society organizations, human rights defenders, and migrants themselves. So this is one area. And then also alternatives to detention. This is an area that we are looking at in terms of looking at ways that migrants can stay within the community in a non-custodial setting and to have legal support guidance while they're doing that as alternatives. I guess that's it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Just I saw on PICUM's website circulating the initiative about mobile phones to be kept by migrants and refugees. Is it some joint advocacy campaign or?
Yes, thanks for asking about that. I will double check with Sylvia, but that's, I think, something that our members are probably leading themselves that we're supporting. But it's also to ensure that migrants aren't completely cut off from the outside world, from their families, et cetera, while they're in detention. I can double check more on that, but it's not something that we as PICUM are leading per se.
Okay. So this is also an example. If civil society has an initiative and wants to elevate it, it can join up with both either PICUM or maybe ECRE to also to strengthen this sort of initiatives.